By way of introduction, I am a journalist based in New York City. I have been an editor at The Forward for the last 3 years and was a reporter for Haaretz. In my spare time, I am an Orthodox Jewish rebbitzin in Manhattan's Upper East Side. So women's leadership in religious communities is something that I care deeply about because it is an issue I have found both as a rebbitzin in a traditional community where I see young women and girls looking desperately for representation. And it's something I see as well as a journalist today when I investigate all sorts of stories related to Jewish women's lives, whether it is related to Torah education, sexual abuse, reproductive justice, visibility in the Haredi world. Real strong Jewish women's leadership is essential to the health of our society, to ensuring that Jewish women are able to be safe and empowered to live their lives. So without a further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. I will begin with introducing Rabbi Dalia Marks, who is the Rabbi Aaron D. Pankin Professor of Liturgy and Midrash at the Hebrew Union College Jerusalem Institute of Religion's Taub Family Campus in Jerusalem, who teaches in various academic institutions in Israel and in Europe. Rabbi Professor Marks is a 10th generation Jerusalemite, earned her doctorate at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and her rabbinic ordination at HUCJIR in Jerusalem and Cincinnati in 2002. She is involved in various research projects and is active in promoting liberal Judaism in Israel. After Rabbi Professor Marks, we have Rabbi Gesa Aderberg, who is the first woman rabbi to serve in Berlin since Regina Jonas. She serves as the rabbi of the Oranienburger Strasse Synagogue of the Jewish community of Berlin. She's the founder of Masorti Germany with the Masorti Kindergarten, serving 80 children, and the Jewish International School, Masorti Grundschule, a bilingual Hebrew-German day school for grades 1 to 6, which opened in 2018. After Germany, we will take a quick detour to Argentina, where Rabbi Judith Nowominsky will be speaking to us. Rabbi Judith Nowominsky has worked for 25 years in the Jewish School Network in Buenos Aires, teaching Jewish studies to students of all ages. Rabbi Nowominsky is currently Dean of Students and Professor at the Marshall T. Mayer Latin American Rabbinical Seminary and a member of the executive of the Latin American Rabbinical Assembly. And finally, joining us from Yerushalayim, Rabbanit Dr. Jenny Rosenfeld is currently part of Kolech's Lamdaniot program, serving as a female religious leader in the Katamonim neighborhood in Jerusalem. Previously, she served as the Manhiga Ruchanit in Efrat for 5 years, where she also directed the Rabbinic Court for Financial Matters. She completed the Susie Bradfield Women's Institute for Halachic Leadership program at Midreshet Lindenbaum and received permission to give halachic rulings a heter hora'ah from Rabbi Shlomo Riskin and Rabbi Shvi Reich. It is a great honor to be with you today. I think we will begin, if it's all right, with Rabbi Professor Marks, he will be our first panelist, and I guess I'll move from each one of you. Rabbi Professor Marks, if you could start us off and tell us a little bit about what your leadership role is within your community, and what have been the challenges taking on that role as a female spiritual leader.
So thank you very much. I think I'm privileged enough to be standing on the shoulders of very brave women who were the generation before us and sort of paved the way. And I think it is also one of the things that we need to do. We need to remember these very brave women and to pay respect to our pioneers, to our chalutzot, when we come to pave the way. And you mentioned some of the speakers before, dear Avital, mentioned the fact that on Hanukkah we talk about women's power. I would like to a word of caution in this regard. Most of the women that we mention are women that sort of gained their reputation through enormous sacrifice. Either they were sexually abused, raped, presented naked, or other ways of defiling them. So I think that when we talk about female models, we need to be very cautious in our choices, not to bring things that may be jeopardizing our desire and our commitment to create safe space for women. I would like to present another woman that we often forget. Jewish tradition tend to forget it, and that's Queen Shlom Tzion, the Hezmonite. She was almost the only queen in the history of the Jewish people who ruled on her own for 9 years, which were years of prosperity and peace, instead of engaging in wars like her late husband, King Yanai. She just negotiated and found peace. So this is something just that I wanted to say about that. And regarding what we do here, I can't even begin to tell you how moved I am with this event. It should have been something that is so obvious, that Jewish people, Jewish women meet together and we discuss things, but unfortunately this is not. And I think that one of the things we need to remember in all of our conversation, regardless of our very different ideas and very different ways we deal with Judaism, that what unites us is so much greater than what sets us apart. So in terms of the halakha, yes, we differ in terms of the halakha, but I don't know if it is so important for each of us to check in each one's refrigerator. I think we share so much. We share a common history, we share common year cycle events, we share common food, we share common festivals, we share common pains. There is so much that unites us, and we tend to forget it and neglect it and put in the center our treatment or the relationship to the halakha. And this is something that I am very committed in trying to bring people together. And when we talk about women, I think women tend to put their ego aside and to really sit around the table and to talk. And I think maybe our Geula, our redemption, will come from women. So it's not just women taking care of women and women role and women's safe space, but us taking care and taking the charge to be to bring a good and well-being to the Jewish world and to the world and to itself.
Beautiful. I so agree. Geula will come from women. That is, it's very deep, and it's something I hope we'll all be part of.
Right?
Like to call,
when they're married, they were redeemed.
And I was about to say, exactly, we were redeemed from Egypt because of women's merits. And as you said, very poignantly, 100%. I think the Jewish heroines we traditionally sort of celebrate over the years, unfortunately come from very sort of dark stories. But I think there's so much potential for us to light up that darkness. So thank you. That was really just so eloquent. Rabbi Gesa Adderberg.
Positive models, right? Like Queen Shlom Tzion.
Rabbi Gesa Adderberg.
I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you. And talking about after my very good friend and colleague, Rabbi Dalia Marks, who we met when we were rabbinical students and had a group which was called Kochot Atzmeinu, working on the Ha'atzama, on the empowerment of female rabbinical students in Jerusalem, is one of my, it's really a very powerful experience we shared, and it's just wonderful, Rabbi Dalia Marks, to be together on this. And obviously coming from Berlin and serving in a synagogue where Rabbi Regina Jonas did serve before the war is, especially today when it's Erev Rosh Chodesh, very meaningful and moving for me. I am the rabbi of the Oranienburger Straße Synagogue, and Avital Chizik Goldsmith Yeshakor on pronouncing it correctly, because that's often a difficult point. And one of the challenges, I think, and that's also what was already said, is that we tend to be called the first ones. And those who come after us are then also called the first ones, like the first one serving the first one ordained in such and such, this first one ordained from such and such organization. And what sounds on a first, if you listen first to it, it sounds like empowerment for women. Actually, it's taking away from our power, because it diminishes our ancestors, the amazing women, our foremothers, on whose shoulders we are standing. And I think this is something that we have really, the female rabbis, both in the Masorti conservative movement and the Reform movement and Reconstructionist, we really have understood that, because we have already a generation of ordained female role models before us. And I'm very thrilled to see the steps that now are taking place in Orthodoxy of finding more religious leadership roles for women also. One of the big issues that I have been confronted at the beginning of my rabbinate, it's much less now, is an issue of authority. A rabbi is in Mara de Atra, is making decisions for his or her community. And I think I've been challenged much more about this than other rabbis, male rabbis have been challenged in the beginning, which leads to a rethinking of who am I in my rabbinic role? Where do I want to step back and be warm and welcoming and, being called by my first name? And where do I need to step up and work from a place of authority? This is a big, big issue. Another challenge that I see is that we are very often only called on female topics, so to speak. This year is different because this is about empowerment of women and us sharing our stories amongst each other. But in the larger public, I have a lot to say about halakha, about tefillah, about many other topics. And very often I'm just asked about the role of women or a specific female-related halachic issue. And I think that's diminishing our roles, and we need to find spaces where we are seen as leaders with a gender, but not gendered. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. We can switch to Rabbi Judith Nowominsky, joining us from Argentina. I think she'll be speaking in Spanish.
Hi to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with everybody this union in diversity. On this occasion, I'll tell you a little bit of my personal story because people doesn't know much about women in Latin America. And when I was 17, I entered the Latin American Rabbinical Seminary, and after a few months and with the practice, I came to my teacher, Rabbi Marshall Meir, Zichro Livracha, and I told him that I wanted to be a rabbi, and he told me that the challenge was a big one, and he will be the first one to support me. But this was only beginning in the US, and the question is, where did my idea of becoming a rabbi came from? Because we have no internet, we even didn't watch the movie Yentl, and only in 1994 the first woman was ordained as a rabbi at the Latin American seminary. And when I was able to become a rabbi, I was already married with 2 children, but I always was engaged with Jewish education, and my heart wanted to be a rabbi. And I worked 25 years in Jewish schools, always teaching Hebrew and Jewish studies. And what I did with my students was always in the classroom. And I really loved to teach, but I understood that I had 2 things to do. One was my love to Hebrew and to the sacred text. And the other thing was something that was much beyond me, and being myself the engine of a change. So I decided to leave that comfort area and engaging in becoming a rabbi and setting a path for future generations. So I started to study humanities at the Open University in Israel, and I studied as a rabbi, and I studied at the Shechter Institute in Jerusalem. And after several years, I became a rabbi, and I worked as an assistant rabbi in a conservative community in Buenos Aires. And after a short period, I became chief rabbi, but I'm already a grandmother with 3 grandchildren, and they told me then that the community must be led by a man, and I must go to the not to the leading post. So I'm off the time, so sorry. I'll only finish my sentence. Yes. The most important thing that I wanted to tell this story is because I didn't accept that I was to be in a second post after the leadership of a man, because we have to set the limits, and time will not bring the changes. We must bring the changes. I'm today the dean of the students at the seminar, and one thing is Regina Jonas, what they said, that the talent is important and not the gender. Thank you very much.
Judith Nowinski, thank you so much for joining us today. Rabbanit Dr. Jenny Rosenfeld.
It's wonderful to be here today, and really what an honor to be on this panel with other female rabbis from around the world. I think that it's interesting as the representative of the Orthodox community. Definitely, we are standing on the shoulders of giants, of women from previous generations, but there is a way in which we are charting a certain path of how Orthodox women's rabbinic leadership looks. In my current role, I am working in the Katamonim community of Jerusalem under the auspices of Kolech's Lamdaniot program. Kolech, the Forum for Israeli Women, has placed various women around the country in communities to try to give them a platform for religious leadership in their communities. So that is something that I'm at the very beginning of, and facing the usual challenges, but also the challenges of COVID in that endeavor. Previously, I worked in Efrat for 5 years under the auspices of Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. And one of the things that I want to kind of bring to the table in a slightly different angle than has been spoken about until now is a question of who female religious leadership is for. There's been a lot of talk in the previous panelists and opening speeches of women in Jewish history and who we are drawing inspiration from and kind of standing on their shoulders and their legacy. And I think that it's important with all of the talk of women and female empowerment to also make a statement. One of the reasons that I'm in the role that I'm in today is not only for the women, but for the men as well, because I believe that different faces of religious leadership are needed today in the community that exists in all of the different Jewish communities. There are, I would say, an unprecedented number of people who have not found a religious leader, a religious authority that they feel comfortable consulting with. And I think that opening up the field to women as well as men gives a wider array and a wider choice of religious leaders that people can consult with. So it's important for me to open that aspect as well in terms of being here, not just as a woman and not just to serve women, but really to serve the entire people. And my experience in Efrat, and I hope it will be my experience in Jerusalem as well, is that I served as an address to people who were looking and who hadn't found a rabbi that they connected with. And as a new religious leader, and as someone, I think, for the women, I'm not sure one of the previous panelists was mentioning the issue of authority. I think that the issue of authority can work both ways, and that somehow in being a woman who comes onto the scene new, who's maybe younger than previous rabbinic leaders, it also opens up something for people who have perhaps lost trust with the older form of rabbinic leadership to regain that trust in the face of a new type of religious leader. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to, if it's okay, ask a more sort of personal question to each of you. Share, where do you feel that you have made a personal difference, an individual difference as a woman in your leadership role? I would encourage you, if you have any anecdotes, any stories to share about this, an example of that difference that you have made. Maybe we'll start with Rabbi Professor Marks.
I think walking in the streets of Jerusalem is, as a rabbi, is something that is in and of itself a thing. and we carry it with us. And I think this is one of the things that I'm very committed. I'm very happy to be invited to panels and to teach, not as the Reform rabbi, but as a scholar, as a rabbi, as someone who's engaged and learned and gained her authority through what she does in life. And, some of the most surprising encounters that I have are with taxi drivers. I'm the feminist who don't drive. Shame on me, but that's the situation. So every time I go on a taxi, the taxi drivers are very chatty in Jerusalem. So I'm like, what do you do in life? And I'm like, I can say I'm a professor, but that's boring. So I say I'm a rabbi. It's like really? They're like, oh, really? And how can a woman be a rabbi? Unheard of. But now you heard about it. And we always have really, really interesting conversation about that. And this is something that I'm very proud of, not only the academic realm or the community realm, but going out to the streets. There's a radio show in Jerusalem called the Jerusalem Parliament, yeah? And all the attendants are older men. Most of them are much more traditional, right-wing. And I was invited to go there once. They didn't let me finish a sentence. But the thing is that after the show, we get hummus from a very famous hummus place here in Jerusalem, and everybody eats. And then we started to talk. Now, the next time they invited me, they were so friendly with me. And, I just became one of them, although I'm pretty different from them on almost any aspect. So this is something that gladdens me a lot when I feel like I can touch people's life and not to convince them to become Reform, but to show them the diversity and the wealth that we have in the Jewish tradition.
Thank you so much. I miss the taxi drivers of Jerusalem.
You do?
Rabbi Ederberg, I do. As soon as I can come back to visit, I will be there. Rabbi Ederberg, if you may unmute yourself.
So I've been thinking about that question a while, because there are so many points where, as a rabbi, you just touch people's lives. People visit, since it's such a landmark. We have, Israeli tourists just walking in from the street. We have people who come and are with us for a simcha, for be it a bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah, brit milah, simchat bat, or whatever. And we make a point of always trying to find out if there are women in the community who have never, ever had an aliyah. And several of my members are already, used to being called. I asked somebody, would you like to be called to the Torah? And usually women say, wow, yes, but I've never done this. How does this work? So I have a group of other congregants who I can just call up on and say, you know what, can you just go out with them for 5 minutes and explain them how it works? And then they come back again, and then we call people for the first time. And we always do a big Siman Tov and Mazel Tov, and I do a special Mishe Berach for them. Maybe it's for their grandparents who were from Berlin and they are on a heritage tour back, or they are, the grandmother or the aunt of one of our Bar Bat Mitzvah kids. And these are absolutely deeply moving rabbinical moments where you share something, le karvan la Torah, right? To bring somebody closer to the Torah in a very, very physical sense. And it becomes so meaningful for people.
Wow, thank you for sharing. Rabbi Novominsky?
Okay. It is true that we have lots of anecdotes from all these years, but I would like to rescue two that happened to me. One is that after many years and after a long path, I got back to the school where I taught for many years, to be in charge of the tefillot of the Yamim Noraim, and I was called, and I was facing former students that came to their tefillot with their children, and there were parents, and for me it was very moving. And the fact that many came to me and really being able to be an Simchat Bat or Yamim Noraim or whatever, and it was not just a woman doing a ceremony. And another thing was in my traveling in South America, there are countries like Chile and Mexico that are not as egalitarian as their conservative communities, but it's different. I was in a synagogue in Viña del Mar in Chile, and women are not considered for a minyan, and only now they started, and I was called for Aliyah La Torah, and the fact that they knew that someone is educated and it is possible for everybody to be on Aliyah La Torah. That's it.
Thank you. Rabbanit Jenny Rosenfeld.
Okay. Sorry, the interpretation was okay. So when I think about kind of moments where I felt that I've had the greatest impact, I'll share maybe two different realms. One of them is as kind of a young rabbanit just starting out, being in one of the larger synagogues, giving a shiur, a lecture on Shabbat afternoon to an audience of, I'd say the more established families, and having someone come over to me at the end who was an older man, saying, how skeptical he was walking in to the shiur, and someone roped him in and said that he has to come and sit there, and kind of at the end how he grew to respect the idea. And I think that there is something that could be upsetting to needing to prove oneself, or to not be looked to immediately as a source of authority. But I think that there's also I've also had moments of fulfillment where someone will kind of come around and say, you know what, I didn't think that this was for me, or I didn't think this was a valuable idea, and now I do. And the second moment that I want to share where I felt a tremendous amount of fulfillment is being a voice, a listening ear, a resource, oftentimes for people going through divorce or other life's crises. And I think that there's a feeling that as a female religious figure who in some way myself is sitting on the margins, people who feel themselves on the margins of the Orthodox community, whether it's someone going through divorce or a victim of abuse, or someone who's an extended period of singlehood, feel that I can perhaps identify with them from a slightly marginal position that I'm in. And so when people in those categories come to speak to me, and I feel that I'm able to help them in a way that they wouldn't necessarily have felt comfortable approaching a male rabbi, it's a moment of tremendous fulfillment.
Yeah, I can totally see that being an issue, specifically in, I think in communities that have very sort of traditional, rigid gender roles, those issues become really complicated. And I think often women struggle to find that voice, that listening ear, that person who can give not only attention, but real counsel, and, make sure to create that safe space. Thank you so much for sharing. I was wondering if we could move over a little bit. I know Professor Marks has to hop off right now, but with those of us remaining, if I could hear a little bit about where you see your role developing in the next 5 years. Rabbi Adderberg.
Well, that really depends on the projects we are running currently. So there's the synagogue, which is going nice, and we have to, recover after COVID-19, but that's a different topic to talk about. We did open a primary school in 2018, which right now we are putting a lot of energy into stabilizing, really developing as a double bilingual school with Hebrew and English and German. And then the next project I'm working on is a 3-religion nursery school together with all female Christian and Muslim partners. So we will have 3 kindergartens under one roof, and we will start the building in 2022. So this will be a big project for the next 5 years. And then Masoti has concentrated very much on Berlin in the first phase, which is, I think, really, really important. But to go beyond and work with other communities in Germany, having, people come over, developing a Masoti presence in other places, that's a big issue. And the third thing, what I would say, is developing our rabbinical seminary. We have just had an ordination with 2, so we have 3 graduates now from the Masoti seminary in Germany, and there are more rabbinical students, female and male, and working with them is just a pleasure to create a new generation of rabbis for Germany and for Europe.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Nowominsky.
Bueno, es muy difícil en el lugar donde yo vivo poder...
Well, it is very hard where I live to imagine 5 years ahead, because we cannot plan ahead for such a long period. But as everybody, I have my dreams as well, and I'm currently working and serving at the Latin American Rabbinical Seminar, and we have many projects, and these are projects that we are doing for the future, for the coming years, from improving the rabbinical school. We have other departments. It is very important to keep having our school for Morim and for Chazanim, also department for Giur. We have several areas. One of theirs is for women. We just yesterday finished a very innovative program, which is Dibur Ruhani, a spiritual dialogues, and it is part of the Center for Women that another female rabbi leads it, and they had their accreditation, the first promotion from students from all over Latin America, because we are doing our classes through Zoom and we have many students. We had many before that, but because of the new reality, we have many more. And we are shaping and educating so other people will be ready, no matter what their gender is, to assist the rabbis, and that everything is not just the work of the rabbi. You need a full team in the work of living that is not as simple as it appears, as it was mentioned before.
Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbanit?
In the next 5 years, I think that on the personal front, I would like to expand my activities here in Katamonim amongst both men and women. I would hope that the number of communities that would be willing to welcome me for a shiur or for a dvar Torah from the pulpit will be more in 5 years from now than it is today, and not only because of COVID. I also think that there's a challenge. My previous work in Efrat, I had, I would say, the luxury of distance, that I did not live in the community. And I feel that that in itself caused more people to see me as a safe person to turn to in terms of all sorts of difficulty and crises. It's challenging to be working in my own community where people can see me in the supermarket, in the school. And I know that that can be a real source of tension for people, feeling like, do they necessarily want to confide in me when I'm someone that they'll have to see, on a daily basis. And so that's a realm in which I hope to make strides in terms of bridging that gap and having people know that I'm a safe person to turn to, and that what's discussed will stay in the rabbinite space, in the rabbinical space, and not enter the supermarket or other communal spaces. The second thing that I would very much love to have in 5 years from now, and it's something that I really feel deeply is missing, are more female Orthodox colleagues here in Israel doing this same type of work. I very much see it as a personal issue, that I want more communities, the more communities that open their doors to women and to female leadership, the more it will happen as kind of a snowball effect. And it's something that I think from my own experience, my own several years of experience, can truly benefit people. And I hope that there are more female Orthodox women across the country who have studied, who have been trained to do this type of work. And the question is just about more places opening their doors. And I hope that will happen. And I hope that I can do my piece in helping that happen.
Thank you. I do agree. I think this is true across boards, across denominations, which is that at a certain point, we just have to demand better of all of our communities, right? We have to demand that excellence and that inclusion and equity really in leadership roles. I wanted to turn to, we have time for just one more question quickly, to turn to this point of unity, which is really one of the major themes of today's forum. And if I could ask you to just, in 1 minute, each of you, if you could share, if possible, to what degree do you interact with or do outreach to other streams of Judaism? Rabbi Adderberg, if you could start off.
In Berlin, we have a so-called unified community, which means that all the different synagogues of the different streams are under one roof. So there is a lot of interaction. COVID obviously less, but we meet constantly, and people also go between synagogues for smachot and just, one Shabbat here, one Shabbat there. So there is a lot of interaction. Most naturally, it's with the Reform colleagues, both male and female. I see from some of the Orthodox colleagues that they are hesitant because they might, being in touch with us might delegitimize them amongst themselves. We are, Rabbanit Jenny Rosenfeld, we are blessed to have a Maharat also working here in Berlin, who has really become a very good and close friend together with her husband. So with them, it's just fun to be and to work and to plan projects.
Thank you. Rabbi Novominsky.
Sí, yo creo que tenemos muchos desafíos, pero por ahí en un minuto.
I think that we have several challenges, but in a nutshell, I think that this initiative that the WJC had and the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs to unite women from different places and different streams is a model that we must follow, and we have to use it in Latin American. We work more on the ecumenical side, dealing with other religions than with the divisions that we have in the Jewish camp, and there's a lot of work to be done there. I would like to add something that I didn't say, and that is very important in my life over the last 2 years, and it's the practice of Musar, of morality, and beyond my studying of Musar and doing the practice, I started workshops. And it's a dream and a wish that this will be expanded, because our tradition has lots of things to offer that are not so widely known and that didn't have such a good press or public relations. And this will make that all the people coming to the synagogue will find in our Jewish tradition the tools and the path of practice without having to go to search for other things. So there is another thing that I wanted to add, and it's a path a road that I already started. And when I see myself in 5 years, you have to start the engine and really start moving. And I hope that many people will know this issue of Musar, of morality, that is a fascinating world for me.
Wow, thank you, Rabbi Novominsky. And 1 more minute for Rabbanit, if you could.
Okay. So the truth is that in my work thus far, I have not done much work with other denominations, except for panels like this event, other interdenominational panels that I participated in. In the community in which I live now, Katamonim, is not a large community with a female rabbinic leader that I know of. But I'm happy and interested in making that connection. If anyone has someone to connect me to, I would be happy to connect and to try to work together for the good of the whole community.
Thank you. Thank you all so much, Rabbi Professor Marks, Rabbi Ederberg, Rabbi Novominsky, and Rabbi Nitz Rosenfeld. Thank you all so much for joining and for sharing your personal experiences and your insights. This has just been such a wonderful experience for me personally.
Thank you very much, Avital. That was really wonderful.
My name is Alana Baranov, and I am a freelance writer and social justice activist based in Durban, South Africa. I'm also a proud steering committee member of the World Jewish Congress's flagship program, the Jewish Diplomatic Corps. It is my great honor today to be the moderator for the second panel discussion entitled Emerging Leaders in an Ever-Changing Jewish Landscape. We are incredibly privileged to have a distinguished, experienced, and vibrant panel of female Jewish leaders with us, women who are not only effecting change in their own communities, but are also working daily to create a more just and equal world for future generations. The issue of creating an environment where young female leaders can be cultivated and their vision supported is a challenge that faces all communities, but has particular complexities in the Jewish world. As well as facing structural inequalities and systemic gender discrimination, young Jewish women also deal with issues such as the rising levels of anti-Semitism around the world and the divides between religious and secular Jews, and possibly between Israel and the diaspora. Our panel have all blazed a trail towards progress, and we really have much to learn from them. I would like to begin tonight's discussion by briefly introducing each speaker, and then each person will have 2 to 3 minutes to give an opening comment, and we will then begin our conversation. In the interest of time, I ask for all the panelists to please be mindful of the limits for their opening statements and to keep their comments concise, and I will keep the introductions very brief. I would like to begin by introducing Victoria Bedo. Victoria grew up in Budapest, Hungary, and is a rabbinical student at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Upon ordination in May 2021, she will also be receiving her master's degree in Jewish law, and she is currently the rabbinic intern at the Park Avenue Synagogue in New York. Vanessa Harper is a rabbinical student at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion and a rabbinical intern at Congregation Rodef Shalom in New York. Vanessa is the creator of Lech Lechala, preparing an original challah creation with a brief teaching on each weekly Torah portion and for the Jewish holidays. And she is also the author of a forthcoming book on challah-based Torah commentary. Penina Pfeiffer is the founder and the CEO of the new Haredim organization, which seeks to bring together under one umbrella the efforts of NGOs working for progressive ideals in the ultra-Orthodox community in Israel. She is also a founding member of the ultra-Orthodox chapter of the Labour Party in Jerusalem, where she works to encourage coexistence with the Arab community and to advance the cause of ultra-Orthodox women. She has also founded a Beit Midrash for ultra-Orthodox women. And our final panelist is Rabbinit Leah Sarna, who is the Associate Director of Education and the Director of High School Programs at the Drisha Institute for Jewish Education in New York. She previously served as the Director of Religious Engagement at the Anshe Sholem B'nai Israel congregation in Chicago. She was ordained at Yeshivat Maharat, graduating with a BA degree from Yale University. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, to all the panelists. Victoria, I'd like to begin with you. If you could please share a little bit more about yourself and the work that you are currently involved in.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am really, really honored to be sitting on this panel with some of you are actually my friends, which I'm very, very grateful to be able to say that. And of course, thank you for everybody who spoke before us. We truly are, I think, as emerging leaders, standing on the shoulders of giants. So As Alana mentioned, I work as a rabbinic intern at Park Avenue Synagogue, and I'm preparing to become a rabbi. The Jewish Theological Seminary is where I will be ordained from in a few months in Yirtzeh Hashem with the help of God. And I'm looking for my first full-time job. So that really, actually, in many ways, is what I'm very much involved with. I'm trying to figure out what type of community I want to be serving in North America. Where can I most use my talents? And the other thing that is quite important that I'm engaged with, it's very personal, but I think important to mention, is that several weeks ago I became a mother. So my life very much is about trying to figure out how to balance both this new role that I have and how in the future I'm really trying to and want to be a leader and a rabbi of a whole community. And in terms of the impact that I'm hoping to have in the congregational setting, I'm hoping to become a pulpit rabbi, as I mentioned. I just wanted to say that, even though I learn at JTS and I work at a conservative synagogue, I don't think that conservative would be the adjective that I would use to describe myself. Meaning, in primarily, I'm just a Jew, and I'm hoping to be just a rabbi. The same way, I'm not planning on becoming a female rabbi. I'm planning on becoming a rabbi for all, for men and women. And I'm really hoping to serve all kinds of different communities in the future. And then lastly, just one last point in terms of geography and space, because I've been living in the United States for the past decade, but I'm currently actually talking to you from Budapest, Hungary, and I very much consider this as my community as well, and I do all kinds of small projects here and there as well in Hungary. I just finished writing a short commentary on some verses of the Book of Bereshit in Hungarian for a new Hungarian translation of the Torah that is coming out soon. And I think one of my long-term dreams in many, many years, whenever the Budapest Jewish community is ready for it, is to come back here as well and maybe try myself in the rabbinic world and serving the Jewish community here. I think I can conclude there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And a huge mazel tov on the birth of your baby. That is very exciting. And now can we move to Vanessa? Would you mind sharing a little bit about what you're currently involved in?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's an absolute honor to be here. And again, to be sharing this panel with such wonderful people, including friends. So as Alana mentioned, I'm a fifth and final year student at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York. And I'm studying to be a rabbi, which God willing will happen also in May. And as part of my rabbinic training, I have the privilege of working as a rabbinic intern, a student rabbi at Congregation Road of Sholom, which is a large historic Reformed congregation in Manhattan. And as part of my work, I get to do, all kinds of great rabbi things. I get to teach, I get to lead tefillah, I get to give sermons. And all of these things for me they were a given. I was lucky enough to have grown up with female rabbis in my congregation as mentors. I've been lucky enough to study with amazing women on the faculty at HUC, including my teacher, Rabbi Dahlia Marks, who was here this morning. And I really am so grateful to be able to stand on their shoulders and to be able to enter into my forthcoming rabbinate just as Vicky said, as a rabbi, where my gender doesn't have to define me, even though there are still challenges, which I'm sure we'll get to, and things that we can continue to work on. I'll mention briefly the Lech Lechala, because this is something that people are often like, what on earth are you talking about? Lech Lechala is a project that started, it was a personal project initially. It was a way for me to grow in my own Torah study, my own learning. And I started posting these interesting, intricate challah designs that I was basing off of a verse or two from each parsha every week, the Torah portion. And I started posting them on Instagram because I felt like the right place to put them. And people got really interested and they started following along. And so I started adding some commentary to explain what was going on. And it turned into a thing. It turned into a public thing. And people started following along. And what I realized over time is that I had many of my followers are millennials, many who see themselves not really as engaged in our institutional Jewish spaces. And so this was a different way into Torah and into Jewish tradition for them. And so I started building out this project into not only the Instagram project, which you can see, you're welcome to go and look it up, but also into a teaching methodology and something that now I'm privileged to share around the country with all kinds of people, all ages, all different backgrounds. And the big idea behind this is not so much here, let's all learn how to shape challah in cool ways, and it's pretty, and we can study text at the same time. But really, this is about helping people find their own language, their own way in to accessing Jewish tradition, about helping other people find their language. Mine happened to be challah, but whatever your language is, that helps you access Jewish tradition and bring forth new insight. That's something I'm hoping to continue to bring through my rabbinate.
Absolutely love the idea of challah. We definitely need to start that here in South Africa and having a way into, as you said, Torah learning through something so creative. If we could now move to Ms. Penina Foifa.
So thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate this whole panel and forum. I'm going to talk about actually not what I'm doing right now, but two things that I've done in the past few years that were one of the first things I did in my activism. One of them was to found a Beit Midrash for Haredi women, ultra-Orthodox women, Beit Midrash that still exists. It's in my home once a week. We study Gemara, we finish Masechet Kiddushin, now we're on Masechet Shabbat. And the other one is running for city council in Jerusalem. I didn't get in, but I ran with a party called Yerushalmim. The reason I'm choosing to tell you these two particular things is because my mother asked me a question about each one of these things when I did them. When I decided to start the Gemara shir, she asked me, but why specifically Gemara? There's so many other things to study. Why are you choosing that? My father didn't ask me. He knew the answer. And when I ran for city council, she said, are you crazy? It's not paid. It's volunteer work. You're a single mom with 2 kids. Why are you doing this to yourself? And the answer is, I'm going to tell you a story about a woman who is not from my community. She's Bedouin. A few years ago, there was an incident down south in one of the unrecognized Bedouin villages that ended with the death of 2 men. One of them was a Jewish policeman. One of them was a Bedouin man. And it was a very controversial incident because some people said it was terrorism and turned out it wasn't. And so I was reading up on it and I came across an interview with the widow of the Bedouin man who died. Turns out she's a doctor of education. She teaches in a college down south. And as she's telling her story, it turns out that this is the second husband she lost. She lost her first husband, who was his brother before that. And why did she marry this second husband? Because in the Bedouin community, if you don't marry into the family, your children belong to the tribe. I'm not going to ask why the Israeli government doesn't intervene, but that's a fact. So she married his brother in order to keep her children. And that triggered something sort of like a bell in my head. And I realized this woman has everything that we consider to be freedom and equality. And yet she has education and she's self-sufficient, but she can't even choose who to marry, which is, to me, and I think to most people, is the most basic thing. And that's to my mother about why I chose Gemara and why I chose politics, because Haredi women don't have a seat around the table. And as long as you don't have a seat around the table, all the financial independence and all the education you have is not going to create equality and justice.
The work that you do is so inspiring, and that was such a fascinating story. And you say such a stark reality for a woman living in today's day and age, that you don't have the choice of who to marry. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Our final panelist for the introductory remarks this evening is Rabbanat Leah Sarna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I just wanted to share about two different projects. The first one is Penina just spoke so beautifully about the Talmud, and that has really been actually the animating kind of narrative in my life, is my love affair with the Talmud, which I know Dr. Calderon and others who've spoken already today could certainly share in that. As a seventh grader, I was introduced to the Talmud, but all my teachers were always men, and all the rabbis in my modern Orthodox community were always men. And I said to myself, okay, I love the Talmud, but I'll go be a lawyer because it'll use the same skills, and I'll learn Talmud on the side because that's what women do in my community. And then in 2009, just as I was graduating from high school, my teacher, Rabbi Sarah Horowitz, was ordained in the Orthodox community. She got smicha, and so something started clicking in my head, like, wow, I could do that too. 9 years later, I was among the first 25 women to get smicha in the United States in the modern Orthodox community. And I immediately I had a job too at a synagogue, and that was really fantastic. And I was working in Chicago at a synagogue, a wonderful synagogue called Shechel B'nai Israel Congregation. And then this past summer, I moved over to saying, you know what, like those years when I was in middle school and high school, when no one looked me in the face and said, it matters to me that you're good at this, it matters to me that you like this, and you should give your life to this. And I said, you know what, I want to give that to young girls. And so now I run a program for girls in the summers. We accept girls from all over the world. It's called the Dr. Beth Samuel's Drisha Summer High School Program. You can find us at drisha.org/high school. We're accepting applications now. It's a Torah program. It's a Beit Midrash for girls in high school. We run for 5 weeks in the summer. We're hoping to run in person this summer, please God. And the point of the program is just, the Torah is yours. Come and get it. It's yours. It matters to me that you're going to learn it, and I'm going to teach it to you at the highest level possible with the best teachers you could ever imagine, because it matters to me that you're going to learn Gemara, and it matters to me because this is our inheritance. The Torah is ours. So that is the main kind of animating project of my life right now, and I'm so enthusiastic about having this opportunity. Our program is 30 years old. The entire faculty of Midrash at Linden Down, with graduates of our program, women who are professors, women who are changing the world in so many different ways. And it's been such an impactful program, and I'm excited to bring it to the next level. And then I have a side project that's actually kicking off tomorrow that I'm also really excited about, in that I think in the modern Orthodox community, women are not seen as prayer leaders because women do not count in the minyan and typically don't have the opportunity to lead tefillah. But I love tefillah, and I think women should have the opportunity to engage in tefillah, in prayer, wherever they are and whatever complexities life throws at them. So my chavruta and I started a podcast, a prayer podcast called Prayerful. And you can, our first episode is dropping tomorrow for Rosh Chodesh Shivit, for Eid al-Banat. And you should definitely check us out. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, Simplecast. We look forward to your listening.
You have the most contagious energy, and I cannot wait to listen to your podcast tomorrow. That is phenomenal. If you all don't mind, I would like to start off with a question that goes to kind of your personal history and something particular to you. I think people would love to hear what drew you to taking up a position as a female Jewish leader. How has your career kind of led you to where you are? And was there something that sparked off this interest, or that helped propel you to where you are? If you could share a little bit about that. Should we start off with Victoria, please?
Absolutely. The great privilege of going first. So yes, thank you for that question. My personal story is very important to me, and it's a very important part of how and why I want to serve to serve the Jewish community in general, and why I wanted to be a congregational rabbi. I myself come from, I'm a convert to Judaism. My parents are not Jewish. And I got introduced to the world of Torah and the Masorah, the Jewish tradition, when I was a teenager. And as part of the Budapest Jewish community, which is, where I was living at the time, there were really, basically no female religious leaders, maybe with the exception of one. But in the mainstream Jewish community, there were no female religious leaders. There still aren't, not any, I might add. And so for me, the thought of becoming a rabbi was not, the combination of being a woman and being a convert it just seemed so far off. It seemed so impossible. And after I graduated high school, I was really fascinated. I was thirsty. I wanted to learn more. Like Rabbanit Sarna, I also was very interested in Talmud, but had no access to Talmud in the Hungarian Jewish community. And so I ended up going to Israel. I was at the conservative yeshiva for 2 years. I was there for 1 year, and after 1 year, I realized how little I know. So I stayed for another year. And after having been to Israel, I decided to go to the United States, which is how I ended up in the US. I went to Brandeis University, where I took more of an academic career. I was more interested in Judaism, Jewish studies from an academic perspective. And I thought, maybe, okay, I can't be a rabbi because I don't know enough Torah and I'm a woman. But you know what? Maybe I can be a professor, right? Like maybe I'll just learn enough in the academic setting and become a professor. And as I was writing my senior thesis, I realized that the thing that really animated me, the thing that kept me up most, was talking about my project with other people. It was not sitting in the library and doing research, but it was actually engaging with people. And so that was a very important realization for me, is that I wanted a combination of text and Torah, and as well as working with people and serving people. And that is ultimately why I applied to rabbinical school, and how I ended up in this field.
Such a fascinating story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Vanessa?
So as I mentioned before, I have the privilege of having grown up in a congregation where I always had women rabbis as mentors, and where I was encouraged from a very young age to be part of synagogue life, of Jewish life. And for me, of all the things I did, that my Jewish identity and my involvement in the Jewish community, it was like a fire inside. That's what gave me strength and excitement and motivation to go through the world. And I held on to that. And my rabbis would say to me, like, Vanessa, you're going to be a rabbi someday. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. Okay. Like, it was a given. And I went through college. I took some twists and turns. There were a couple of other career options that popped up. But as I was getting ready to graduate, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with myself. And I decided, okay, do I want to be an academic? Do I want to be doing Jewish communal service? I decided I'll take a year, I'll work. I had been teaching in Jewish settings for a number of years part-time, and decided I would take a full-time job as a Jewish educator, and absolutely fell in love with the work. I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I stuck with that for a couple of years. Another great mentor in my life said, Vanessa, you really should go to rabbinical school. And I thought about it and realized over time that this was the rabbinical training was what was going to give me the most tools and the most access to be able to share that fire that I had, to be able to use it to light fires for others. And that path felt like it would just open the most doors and allow me to do the most good. And so here I am.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Penina, would you mind sharing with us?
Pleasure. I was born a feminist into a Haredi community. So that kind of triggered certain, reactions. And the truth is that people ask a lot of times, like, how is it possible to be a Haredi feminist? Isn't that sort of like, contradiction in terms or paradox? And it is, but I think that there's, there are halachic limitations on equality, and I recognize that. But having said that, we're still very, very far away, at least in my community, from from accomplishing the equality that's within the halachic bounds. So I'm more than happy to set aside those issues that are right now, unsolvable, and solve the ones that are, and promote the ones that are, and work towards more inclusion in things that we can be included in. And there's a lot of work to be done. We can still get to 90%, and then the rest, whatever. There's other generations of women who can go ahead and take that up. The fact that I founded actually like a Beit Midrash was unusual. Now there are more. I'm not the only one, but at the time it was kind of like a first, and it's still a small movement, but it does exist now, which is pretty amazing because 5 years ago it didn't exist. But the thing about it is that it's unusual in the Haredi context, because usually Haredi feminism is actually about secular issues, like getting elected, or all kinds of things that are not religious issues. And this is the one place where we touch on religious participation. Whereas, for example, the whole issue of Beit Knesset and all that, we don't even, we don't go there. I think also on a personal note, I got divorced 10 years ago, and it was okay. It was better than being married in my case, but it did, it does change your status, your social status. And I felt like I had already paid the price, so I might as well enjoy it. I might as well do the things that I always had to stop myself from doing, because it's to be normal and fit in and, do the right thing. So that gave me a certain amount of freedom to accomplish certain things.
You have such strength, and it's wonderful to hear that the Beit Midrash movement is starting to grow there. That is wonderful. Rabbinit Sarna.
Thanks for the question. My grandparents and my parents are scholars and leaders in the Jewish community as well. So Jewish communal leadership is kind of in my blood. My mother is actually one of the first 100 Reform women to be ordained also. She's a ordinee of HUC. But for me, the question was like, okay, like I could for sure go to the Jewish Theological Seminary where my grandfather taught, or to HUC where my mother's ordination and her doctorate is from. Like, why push in the modern Orthodox community? And to me, the answer is that every single day, from when I was a child, I would say in Tefillah, brighten our eyes with Torah and make our hearts cling to mitzvot. And for me, like Torah and mitzvot are just that. Like my heart clings to it. My eyes are brightened by it. And being a member of a community within where those things are just obvious, where Torah education and Torah study and mitzvot observance is an obvious part of every day, like I couldn't compromise on that. Like I needed to find my place within that community instead of going outside of it. Because I love Torah and Tefillah, and particularly the Talmud, and particularly then the interpretation of the Talmud into how we live our day-to-day lives from these like freewheeling conversations that happened in Babylonia, 1,500 years ago, to like how exactly we live today, and understanding exactly how we got there, and that sense of like connectedness and intentionality and brilliance that rabbis and Jewish leaders and people living Jewish lives have put into what it means to live the Jewish version of the good life. Like I couldn't compromise on any of that. I just wanted to be part of it. I just wanted to be a chain in that tradition, a link in that chain of Masorah. And so for me, that from a very young age, that has been like incredibly kind of motivated passion and that's why I do what I do today. And just to summarize, I guess, like the Talmud is awesome. That's why.
Thank you. Your all of your stories are absolutely fascinating, and it's amazing to hear how different women were moved to get into the different roles that you all hold at the moment. My next question would be, there's so many questions to ask all of you, and we could talk for hours, but to ask really the heart of what we're dealing with in this panel discussion, what do you see as the challenges facing emerging Jewish female leaders, and what do you see as the opportunities that are out there for us as well? Victoria, would you like to start?
Sure. So why don't I start with the opportunity? I feel like we often usually talk about the challenges. So I'll just say the opportunity in one sentence, specifically for the conservative rabbinate. So this is very much my community in North America, I might add. I think the opportunity is that the more female leadership there is, both clergy, so rabbis, cantors, but also in all kinds of different communal positions, the more female leadership there is, the more just normative it becomes, so that we don't have to even have this panel conversation ever again, right? Like the more it's just the more it's muvan me'elav, it's totally obvious, then nobody's going to call me a woman rabbi or a female rabbi. They're just going to call me rabbi. And then I actually get to do my job, which is teach Torah and serve everybody. So that's, I think, really the opportunity. The challenge is that in the conservative movement, and I mean, Vanessa can talk more about this, but in general, I think in the progressive movement, in the movements where women are ordained, in fact, more women are being ordained than men at this point, almost every year. So right, exactly. So in this reality, you could say, okay, well, there's no problem. Women get to be rabbis, men get to be rabbis, everybody's equal. But there's still a big question about what type of jobs women are being offered, and also what type of jobs women are taking. And I think this is really interesting, is that the many female rabbis still end up not in pulpit positions, but in education roles, organizations, chaplaincy, etc. Because the pulpit rabbi position still just skews more towards men. I think even in more liberal communities, if you think of, okay, imagine a rabbi in front of you, even in conservative and reform communities, people will imagine, a middle-aged or older man with a beard. That's just the image people have. So the question of really having more women in the pulpit, and not just in assistant rabbi positions, but also in senior rabbi positions, is important. And lastly, this is just what I want to say about not about women being offered jobs, but women taking jobs, is what are the circumstances that allow more women to take these positions? And I mean, I hate to, bring in the family, career woman cliche, but it's true. It's that if synagogues are not offering parental leave, then it is going to be much harder for women to take those positions. If there is no time off, if there's no opportunity for women to spend time with their families, they're just not going to want to become senior rabbis of large congregations. So that's really, I think, one of the core issues.
Absolutely. I think that cannot be discounted. In fact, we need to be focusing on that final issue more so that we can fully address it. It would make a huge difference. Vanessa.
So Vicky, you summarize this incredibly well. So I'm just going to try to build on what you're saying and target a little more towards the reform movement. So at this point, the reform movement, we're about 50-50 men and women in the rabbinate. I don't have the statistics on the cantorate, but again, more women in rabbinic and cantorial school than men at this point. And the issues that we're running into are still, again, it's the glass ceiling, the very tops of organizations. We're across the board, not just in congregations where you'll see a senior, a CEO, or whatever it is, will be male, and you'll have women every other level. In fact, probably most of the professional staff. And I think this also translates to lay positions to some extent as well. And so we have some issues with representation at the very top, although this is beginning to really change in the reform movement, especially the last 5 years. We're seeing a huge uptick in the number of female senior rabbis. But another piece of this is pay equity, and this is an ongoing issue even within progressive spaces. We think we're doing a good job. We're not done yet. So pay equity is still an issue, and yeah, the types of jobs. Vicky, you got it. So looking a little bit towards a challenge and an opportunity that's. I'm going to just move this conversation a little bit into another frontier, which is women have been ordained in the Reform Rabbinate for the last 50 years, and we are in the first generation, still not like brand new, but the first generation of non-binary rabbis, of trans rabbis, and women who have been in the rabbinate for longer are able to be allies who know what it's like to be marginalized and help to create space to bring more people to the table. Representation is important for women and also for people of all genders, and so that's an ongoing challenge and opportunity as well. And I think that the presence of women in the rabbinate has changed, especially in the Reform movement, adding gender-neutral translations, gender-neutral God language that gives people the space to see themselves in our tradition. These are things that came about when women started reaching positions of power. And so just continuing that work, the more women, the more people of all genders that we have in these spaces, the more Jewish tradition will be able to be built and shaped for everybody.
Absolutely. You put it so beautifully. Penina, what do you see as the challenges and also the opportunities?
Well, our challenges are, a little bit different. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not going to be a rabbi. My daughters are not going to be rabbis. At least I don't think so. They also have no interest, but that's besides the point. I did. In any case, we're more like suffragettes, like as far as our challenges right now, it's a little different. But there are opportunities. First of all, Haredi women are on a secular level, better educated than their male counterparts. So that gives us a certain amount of leverage that's growing. And there's even backlash from the, traditional rabbinic, like Haredi male political leadership. But there's a lot of work to do. I think that's why it's important for Haredi girls. For example, my program is still like an outlier type of program. There is no school, no Haredi girls school that teaches Gemara to girls. There is no such school. And to me, what I'm doing, it's nice, but it's not a game changer unless it becomes a curriculum. That's just a fact. So to me, that's maybe the next challenge or opportunity or something that I'd like to see happen in the next generation, as well as political leadership. Right now we have the issue of the religious councils. And there's a not a law, but a directive, okay? Whatever it is that for inclusion of women in the religious councils, and now it's going through, it's a whole political mess. But in any case, one of the things we're doing is to try to get Haredi women on to religious councils, because that's an administrative position, not a religious position. So we can, there's wiggling room there. So those are the things that I'm looking at now.
Wonderful. And Rabbi Nitzarna, would you share with us your challenges and opportunities?
I think, the opportunities are many and they're tied into the challenges, as everyone else has said. There's so many places in the modern Orthodox community that women aren't yet. Kind of the main modern Orthodox Rabbinical Council in the United States does not yet include women. The many modern Orthodox synagogues and even modern Orthodox day schools will not hire women to teach Talmud. Synagogues are not hiring women to be Rabbaniot in the synagogues. And obviously I should also mention that not even Yoatzot, meaning Yoatzot Halacha, who only who only advise halachically on matters of like women's bodies, basically. Even then, like in the community that I live, we have many yoatzot, but they're not affiliated with the synagogue because the synagogue's not comfortable with it yet. So there's so much room for growth in terms of comfort with women who are empowered halachically and knowledgeable halachically. And that's one kind of area of growth and opportunity that I'm very excited to see develop in the coming years as people just get more comfortable with what does it look like to ask a woman a halachic question and feel like she's actually knowledgeable enough to know the answer. But that's tied in to the second challenge, which is that education is still not equal. I mean, it's different from the community that Penina is describing. In our community, women typically are taught Talmud all the way through high school. They'll go to Israel for a year, for a gap year, and learn Talmud there. But once you're looking to learn kind of post that year, that's when you get into trouble. So you could go to Yeshivat Maharad and learn for 4 years, but there's another degree that exists out there and a whole other like realm of Jewish legal knowledge that is not yet really open to women, and there's no institution that's really going to say yes, like just come and sit and learn without end in the United States, and that really kind of puts a limit on women's learning here in a way that men do not experience, in part because men can at a certain point just ease into the ultra-Orthodox community's learning spaces. But even within the modern Orthodox learning spaces, there are opportunities for men in terms of Jewish education that are not yet available to women. And Drisha, the organization I work for, is starting to fix that problem, but in Israel. So we have a yeshiva in Israel that is learning without bounds. You can sit there for however many years, learn all the Torah you possibly can. The two women who are Rosh Yeshiva have been learning together for 20 years, and they now teach, but they continue to learn themselves. And that's amazing, and I would love to see something like that grow also in the United States, but we're very proud of our project in Israel as well. We see that as like a huge next frontier in terms of really like blowing open the final kind of caps on women's learning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has truly been an insightful discussion, and it really is just the beginning, I think, of an important conversation that needs to continue, looking at what the challenges and opportunities for emerging female leaders in the Jewish context are and how we can impact the future. I really would like to thank all of my esteemed panelists for joining us today, for sharing their inspiring stories and their work, and may you all continue to go from strength to strength in all that you do. Thank you so much.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.